So in this lecture, I'm going to talk briefly about how to succeed in an online hybrid course. So there are some benefits about an online hybrid course we need to talk about, which explains why I would choose to teach using that method. But first I need to just say what an online hybrid is. And an online hybrid is basically a course in which you have some online components, but also some in-person components. Typically, there might be some videos, some lectures that you would watch online on your own, and that then allows for class time to be spent focusing more on things like discussion. That's kind of the idea of it. So theoretically, it gives us the best of both worlds. You get the flexibility of an online course. You don't have to always watch the lectures at the same time. You could watch them early to get ahead. You can space them out. So instead of having to sit through a 50-minute class, you could watch 10 minutes, take a break, watch 20 minutes, take a break, watch another 20 minutes. So it gives you that flexibility. But also it gives you the structure of an in-person course because you're still meeting, right? Sometimes with a pure online course, the course doesn't seem real. You never meet the professor, you never meet your fellow students. But here you still are meeting. And so that's the basic idea. And this allows more creativity when the class does meet. As I said before, it kind of allows you to have a little bit more time, a little bit more flexibility when it comes to in-class discussions and activities. And I think it also in many ways approximates a working environment more closely. A large part of being a university student, of course, is getting ready to go out into the professional working world. And in the professional working world, a lot of times your time isn't that structured. You don't always have people keeping an eye on you, taking attendance, making sure you're where you're supposed to be. Instead, they're wanting you to work on your own and then have results, right? Your boss doesn't want to be watching over you all the time. Your boss wants you to work independently and then get them that report, do that work on your own. So I think in many ways then, because it puts more on a student to decide when to work, it's more like a professional environment. And of course, the large point of university is trying to get you ready for that. Now, those are why I think this is so strong to use an online hybrid model, but there's also some obstacles. And so it's important to talk about how to overcome them. First of all, flexibility is helpful, but can also be dangerous because flexibility is limited. So what do I mean by that? Like I said, when you're in an in-person class, you have to show up at a certain time and you have to sit through the entire class. And even if you're bored or, you need to go do something, you can't do it, right? You just have to sit there. Whereas with a video lecture, you could listen to it 10 minutes, pause it, go take a break, come back, listen 20 minutes, like I said previously. But the problem is when you have that freedom to decide when you watch the lectures, you may just never watch the lectures, right? That's the danger. So that flexibility is limited. It's easy just to put off everything until the day before it's due and then find, oh, I can't do a week's worth of work in a couple hours before it's due. So the issue then, you have to be very careful about making sure that you're self-disciplined, that you're structured, that you're doing the work on your own. And there's ways I'll help you with that. So it's important to set specific times to complete coursework. Typically, I think to use daily goals in which you figure in breaks. You don't want to just assume, hey, I can work 4 hours straight. No one can do that. It's very difficult to do. So I think it's a good idea to say, you know what? Every day, I'm going to watch at least 20 minutes of lecture or 30 minutes of lecture, or how much you have to do to make sure you get everything done, right? And choose a day, a time to do that. That will make sure that you do it. If for some reason you have something come up, try and do things early rather than putting them off till later. So it's key to set specific times to complete your coursework and to try and have daily goals with them. Be particularly careful about when you complete assessments. So if there's a quiz or an exam that's online, you want to make sure that you don't wait till the last minute to do them. So to give you an example, I had students in an online class that just was really struggling with her exam grades. And I looked at her transcript and her grades were really good. I was like, why is this student struggling? And then I noticed that she took her exams at like 11 p.m. And what she was doing was she wanted that extra time to study, but she also had to work on the test day. So she was waiting to take her exam till 11 p.m. And so she wasn't awake. She wasn't aware. We talked about it. She didn't really realize it was a problem until we talked about it. The next time she made sure to take the exam when she was more awake, and her grade went up. So it's important to be mindful about that. Don't put things off. One thing to keep in mind, and this is where things can be confusing with an online hybrid class, they should have the same amount of contact time as a completely in-person class. And that does not include the time spent studying. So you don't want to say, okay, I show up to class and I watch the videos, I'm done. Well, no, you're not. You still have to study the material. You still have to make sure that you learn it, right? It's still important to make sure that you learn it. And you also just have to be realistic about what you can do. You don't want to try and think that you can just do a whole class in a couple hours. You can't. And one thing that is also tempting to do, it's tempting to cut corners. So for example, some people say, well, you know what? I'm just not going to watch the videos. I'm just going to read what's on the PowerPoints. One thing you'll find in my classes is that PowerPoints, they're a guide that's kind of has my notes to remind me what I'm supposed to talk about, but you're not going to get the full content from the PowerPoints, right? Sometimes it's just a picture. Well, what does that picture tell you? You have to listen to what I'm actually saying. So there's a temptation just to just to read the PowerPoints, not to watch the videos, especially because you probably have had classes where the professor just read the PowerPoints. I don't do that. So it's important. Similarly, I give study guides. You want to make sure that you actually take notes and then answer the questions. That will help you to make sure that you actually learn and understand the material. There's a saying, you don't really understand something until you can teach it, right? Unless you can explain it to someone else, you don't really understand it. So the reason I give study guides then is it gives you the opportunity to take your notes and formulate answers to those questions, which is kind of like teaching. And if you can do that, you understand the material, you just need to review it to make sure you remember it. But if you can't answer the questions on the study guide when you have access to your notes, how could you possibly answer questions well on an exam? You can't, right? So it's very important that I want to stress there's flexibility here with the online hybrid format. It lets you do some really cool things in the classroom, I think, but it doesn't mean less time. It doesn't mean less effort. It just means you have some flexibility. So just a few things about environment. So when you're actually watching the online lectures and things like that, make sure you have a quiet place dedicated to study where you can work peacefully. That can be really, really difficult for some people. I know students who live with multiple siblings and it's very hard to get that quiet time. It's important to talk to your family, to work with them in a way that can ensure that for you, or to find a place where you can get that. Make sure the people around you know that you actually are studying. It can be very difficult for people sometimes to understand that, and sometimes they have to be politely reminded that you're working. You can do this with a sign on your door or with something else that helps people understand, hey, I'm studying. Please do not, ask me to do anything. This is especially true when you're doing a timed assessment, a quiz or an exam. So to just tell you one story, I had a student who really struggled on an exam, and he came to my office and we talked about it, and he said, oh yeah, my mom needed help in the middle of the exam. She called me out of the room a couple times because she needed me to help around the house. I'm like, okay, that's kind of a difficult situation. It would be good to talk to your mother and let her know that when you're taking the exam, you let her know ahead of time, Mom, please don't talk to me for the next 50 minutes because I need the time to take this exam. But do make sure, especially when you're doing an assessment, that people know. And you can plan this ahead of time, right? Okay, people aren't usually bothering me at this time. I'm not going to be talking to people, or, that's when I'm going to take the exam. And you want to make sure that you turn off all other applications or distractions. So, for example, a lot of times I turn my email off when I'm doing some really important work, because what happens is especially if it's difficult work, because what will happen is my email will make a noise to tell me I got a message, and then I'll go check it because I'd rather be checking email than doing that difficult work, right? So it's better just to have it off. I can turn it on and check email later. This is especially true with your phone, right? It's easy to leave your phone on to get messages and things like that, and you don't want to do that, right? It's important to work efficiently. Human beings can't really multitask. We need to focus. And that's, again, the advantage of having an online component to a class. So, you've got the lecture on there. You know that you're getting you're going to get an important phone call. You can go ahead and do your work. When that important phone call comes, you pause your phone. or I mean, I'm sorry, you pause the lecture. Now, don't normally keep your phone on. I'm just saying if you're in that instance, you get that flexibility that you can structure around that. But at the same time, when it is your time to study, you want to focus on the studying, right? You want to be, and that's the way to be efficient. So one thing that's really cool about having an online component to a course is it gives you some advantages that you maybe wouldn't normally have. For example, professors don't have pause buttons. If you're listening to a lecture, you don't quite get what's being said, it's hard to hear it again. But when you have a video, you can just listen to the video again. You can just listen to that part you're having difficulty understanding. So that's something that's great. One thing I highly recommend too is that you set up things so that you have two screens when you're watching the lectures. So you can see here in this picture, this is kind of how I have things set up typically. I have my laptop that's connected to a monitor. So it's not that there's two computers there. There's one computer, but two screens, one monitor hooked up and then to the laptop. And then I can watch the video on one and then take notes on the other. Now, you don't have to have this set up with two monitors. You could listen on a phone and type your notes on a laptop. You could listen, even better, you could listen and watch on like an iPad or tablet and type on a laptop. But that can help you to type your notes a bit faster. And also, like I say, it's easy to pause. You don't have to keep jumping back and forth between applications. But that's something I would recommend doing. So, all that being said, basically, online hybrid classes have a lot of advantages to them. I think you can get the best of both worlds through them. But if you're having trouble with it, it's important to identify why that is and then change that behavior. And if you have trouble doing that, to just let me know. So I gave you two examples in this brief lecture. I had the student who was taking her exams too late. She didn't realize that was a problem. We talked about it. We fixed the problem. In her grade, I believe she ended up with an A. And I told you about the other person who had issues with people interrupting him during the exam. We talked about that. He took care of it. We were in good shape. So the major thing is I've tried to give you some tips here that I think will help. But key also is just communication. You'll still see me in the classroom, but you can also email me. If you're having trouble, you're having concerns, just let me know. We'll figure something out. So good luck.